first playthrough of Elden Ring is one of the most magical experiences you can find in the gaming medium. Opening that door and seeing Limgrave for the first time was just one of those wow moments that I remember feeling when I played Breath of the Wild and stood on top of the cliff, looking out into the world. The game is inviting you to go wherever you want and explore as you like. If you see an interesting landmark, it's not just a background or set dressing. You can actually go there as long as you remain persistent. Elden Ring wants you to explore and be as thorough as you want, often rewarding the player for going off the beaten path. The very first boss you encounter will most likely be the Tree Sentinel, and he will absolutely kick your ass, but you are encouraged to go somewhere else and find new gear, level up, and come back when you're ready to fight. The fuck is that? I swear to God, this game. I might have done some off-camera grinding. Just a little, don't look at my stats. Alright, let's beat this big bitch. Okay, not bad damage. Okay. Yeah, that's what I thought. Var tells you to follow the light of grace to continue your quest, but you can also tell him to fuck off and explore Limgrave and the Weeping Peninsula for multiple hours before even arriving at Stormvale Castle. Thoroughly exploring the world will make it easier to tackle the challenges that lie ahead of you. In this large world, you'll find NPCs, caves, dungeons, and so many secrets and hidden areas. NPCs provide the player with lore, quests, items, and services that help you progress in the world, such as selling arrows or upgrading your weapon and summons. Caves can be found throughout the world, hidden in dark corners and cliff walls. They have upgrade material to upgrade weapons and provide a more streamlined challenge to the player in the form of careful navigation and enemy encounters. They vary in size and complexity and are a nice break from the exploration of the open world. Catacombs also serve a similar role that combines exploration with puzzle solving, but I personally feel that dungeons were the least interesting thing in Elden Ring. Visually, they all look the same with their boring gray stone architecture, and it never really feels like they do anything interesting. I never once explored a dungeon that came away with a feeling of, oh, that was cool. It was always more of, oh, I guess that's it. When you compare them with the caves and especially the legacy dungeons, they really are the weakest part of the game. Legacy dungeons offer a more traditional Souls-like experience. The large scale and insane complexity offers so much in terms of exploration and challenge. Thanks to the innovative feature some people call jumping, these areas have become much more complex and intricate than anything FromSoft has put out in their previous games. Vertical exploration has become possible as now we can jump down on roofs or up on ledges. More than ever, it feels like we have a lot more freedom to explore the areas and go off the beaten path. There are some crazy genius shortcuts and alternative paths that players can take in these levels. Stormvale Castle is visually interesting and has a traditional Dark Souls aesthetic with its grey colors and dark shadows. It has an impressive scale, fun enemies, and provides a great feeling of exploration challenge. There are multiple paths and many shortcuts the player can take until they find themselves at the entrance of Godric's Arena. Stormvale Castle holds two great bosses that serve as a skill check to ensure that the player is capable enough to progress through the game. Margit is an incredibly fun boss with a moveset that I categorize as mostly fair and well telegraphed. His moves are fun to dodge, and it feels extremely satisfying when you manage to dodge his attacks. Godric is another spectacular boss who is really fun to fight. I'd also categorize him as mostly fair, though he does have a move or two that could be considered a bit BS. He is a spectacle and really fun, Overall, I really enjoy Stormveil due to its challenge and exploration, and it gets an A plus for me. Raya Lucaria is not as great as Stormveil Castle, but it's still enjoyable thanks in large part to the amazing visuals. Just look at this. Tell me this isn't one of the most beautiful things you've seen in your life. While Raya Lucaria stands out due to its beautiful visuals, I think it's a bit weak in its exploration. There are times you can go off the beaten path, such as going on top of the roofs and exploring the area before one of the first graces you find the area, which is pretty cool. But on repeat playthroughs I never really feel the urge to explore the roofs, and I just decide to take the path straight to Renala. There are two boss fights in this area. The wolf, which, I think it's a fine fight, but it loses its uniqueness because you'll see this guy again in the open world. And then there's Renala.
I don't want you. Leave me alone. I'm turned on. Mama.
Renala is a visually interesting boss, especially with that beautiful arena. I love this, standing on top of that shallow blue water and the giant, beautiful blue moon in the background. Chef's kiss. But gameplay wise, she's not that fun to fight. Also because you have to do this dumb shit before you even get to fight her. Overall, Raya Lucaria is probably B grading because apart from its beautiful visuals, nothing else about her really stands out to me personally. Volcano Manor is one of the more hidden legacy dungeons, and I think it is excellent. Visually beautiful, there is a lot to explore here. You can go on the roofs, you can explore among the lava, there are hidden rooms and hallways you can find. I really like how you have to go around until you reach this lever to pull up this bridge as a shortcut to the boss, who I also think is pretty good if a little BS. Even further ahead you'll find Rykard, who is visually stunning. He's more of a spectacle boss, something akin to Yorm from Dark Souls 3. He does have this one bullshit move that I really hate and does far too much damage, though I'd say overall, Volcano Manor is really good. And then you have Lanedale, which just has everything else beat in terms of scale. When I say you can go anywhere you see, this is what I mean. First, you're up here looking down at the architect below, and before you know it, you're actually walking between those buildings on the ground, exploring as much as you like. Lanedale is large and beautiful, like me, with so many optional areas to explore, and it has Morgoth, who is cool as hell and ready to fuck your shit up. Marg is a really interesting boss to fight as he pulls out all the tricks in his one final attempt to stop you. He's visually interesting, mechanically fun, and I really like this area as a whole. Lanedale and Stormveil are definitely my favorite legacy dungeons. Then as you progress to the end game, you get Farm Azula, which honestly isn't as fun as the ones before it, and it probably has the shittiest mandatory bosses in the game. The Godskin duo, these guys fucking suck ass. Who have FromSoft thought it'd be a good idea to put these two guys together? What the fuck? Their moves do not complement one another. They both act like their counterpart doesn't exist. There is no fairness here, no thoughtful execution of how to make these guys work together. It's all just bullshit, and so I have to bullshit back with my Mimic Tier to back me up here. Once you're done with them, you have to face fucking Malekith, this fucking ballerina Beyblade wannabe motherfucker who could jump around the arena like this and attack like this, and he is relentless because he has no fucking stamina bar. There is no moment where he just stops. He fucking jumps like and then attacks you without stopping. Then when you think you have an opening, he says, nah, fuck you, and jumps out the way. It is not fun. I do not want to watch a boss flip around the arena while I wait for my turn to actively engage with him. After this, you fight Gideon, who is just whatever. After you defeat him, you get to fight an actual good boss, Godfrey, who has fun moves to dodge, but he has one problem. His attacks do way too much damage. You might have noticed how in all of these clips, my health bar is fucking massive, and that's for one reason and one reason only. Enemies do way too much damage in the late game. Seriously, 1 or 2 hits is enough to end your run. Even if 40 vigor is not cutting it, I had 60 vigor and I was still getting 2-shot. Like, what the fuck is this kind of difficulty? It's not fun getting 1-shot or 2-shot because of one mistake. How's a player supposed to learn a boss's moveset if you just die instantly? No FromSoft, bad dog, stop that. Since we're already talking about Elden Ring's BS, let's talk about the Fire Giant, Elden Beast, and Melania. The Fire Giant is one of the shittiest bosses I have ever faced in a FromSoft game. Why does he have so much health? Why is he so huge that I can't see what he's doing? Fighting this boss takes way too long because of his large health pool, and that wouldn't be a problem if 1. He were actually fun to fight, 2. His attacks didn't take nearly all of your health, and 3. If he didn't run away like a little bitch so much. He's such a big fucker in a terrible area. Honestly, delete all of this shit and this game would be so much better. The Elden Beast is another giant piece of shit who also runs away far too frequently and has multiple BS attacks. I really hate these bosses where I don't feel like I'm actively engaging with them and when there's just so much stupid downtime. Why does he run away like this? It's so shit. It's not fun. I feel like my time is just being wasted. Remove all the running away, this bullshit attack, and you'd have an actually decent boss fight. Difference in quality between Radagon and Elden Beast also just makes it so much more jarring because Radagon is actually fun as hell to fight. You can be in his face for most of the fight while dodging his attacks. Yeah, he has some BS moves too, which is honestly a problem in nearly all of Elden Ring's bosses, but he's still really fun. He's of the same quality as the best Dark Souls 3 bosses. Not like this stupid Jello guy, fuck him. And then you have Melania, Blade of Mikola. Fuck this bitch. Melania has so much BS attached to her. She heals upon successfully hitting you, like if she was a Bloodborne player. And then she does this. Dog, what the fuck is this Beyblade spin to win shit? What am I even supposed to do against this? Am I supposed to dodge it? I don't think so. I don't really have any clear way to dodge it. So what am I meant to do? Am I supposed to take damage here? But if I get hit by at least 2 of her spins, I'm most likely dead. So what am I even meant to do? I don't know. I try to run away, use iframes to dodge the second, and then tank the third. But even that feels so unnatural. Like I'm not doing something the way the game intended. This is one of the worst moves I've ever seen in a FromSoft boss. And you know what's the biggest shame? Melania could have been a great boss, because most of her moves are actually super fun to dodge, and she can be really fun to fight. But that Beyblade move ruins everything. It dictates the entire fight, because I can't be close to her for fear she's just gonna leap into the air and do this move at a moment's notice. I can't fight aggressively or be an active participant in the fight. I have to play passively and hope RNG is on my side. Melania could have been a great boss, a fun challenge, but the developers were so much more concerned with her being ultra difficult rather than challenging and engaging. And I think that's the problem with Elden Ring. Dark Souls, Bloodborne, Dark Souls 3, Sekiro, and then Elden Ring. With each game, FromSoft has been consistently pushing players to their limits in terms of hard bosses and difficulty. They have pushed us to react faster and to learn more and more complex moves. With Dark Souls 3, it felt like they were already pushing the limits of what was possible with the Dark Souls mechanics. Bosses had faster attacks, more combos, but the player's speed was also increased, allowing us to hit and dodge more quickly compared to Dark Souls 1. Sekiro upped the ante with even faster attacks and more combos, but they gave the player new tools and mechanics to properly deal with threats in a fun, engaging, and challenging manner. But with Elden Ring, it feels like they ran out of ideas on how to increase the difficulty in an interesting way. With Bloodborne, they introduced the rallying and parrying mechanic. With Sekiro's, the deflect and posture breaking mechanic. And with Elden Ring, they added a jump button. Now bosses have seemingly infinite stamina and can do 10 attacks in a row that take 90% of your health bar, while you might get the opportunity to hit them once That is, if they don't just jump away from you and reset. This isn't a fun kind of difficulty. It's lame and cheap. I love Bloodborne, Dark Souls 3, and Sekiro bosses because when you master one of them, you can be in their face all day while avoiding their attacks and hitting them back. It was engaging and rewarding to master a boss. But with Elden Ring, even if you can master a boss, so many of them refuse to be engaging. Even if you master Malekith, you still have to deal with his ballerina-ass moves, Melania with her waterfowl, and Elden Beast with his game of flying off and running away. But the bosses aren't the only mixed bag in Elden Ring. Elden Ring's potential for build variety is nothing short of impressive. After beating Renala, you can access the respec feature that allows you to reallocate your stats, which gives you the freedom to try different builds. Thanks to this, you can effortlessly go from a strength build to a magic build, just like that. The problem with this feature is that it is limited use, as you need to use a larval tier in order to respec. I don't understand why FromSoft doesn't just allow you to respec endlessly, especially since they should have known that players would want to experiment with all sorts of weapons and builds. I don't know why FromSoft feels like they can't make any feature frictionless. There are so many outfits, weapons, spells, ashes of wars, talismans, and summons the player can experiment with and discover a build they like and enjoy. Some weapons provide the player a unique moveset. For example, if I press L2 while using the Bloodhound Fang, I can pull off this move that attacks while giving me iframes, and if I press R2 immediately after that, I can do another attack with iframes. Frextra Life alone have hundreds of builds they showcase on their YouTube channel, and many of them are super unique and seem really fun and appealing. The unfortunate part though is that most people won't ever be able to experiment and enjoy different builds because there's so much tedium and grinding attached to experimenting. Let's say you found a weapon that looks cool and you want to try it out. Well, you're gonna have to upgrade it if you want it to be viable in late game areas, so now we need smithing stones. But what if I don't have enough? Well, now I either have to go scavenge the world to look for smithing stones, or I need to find the right bell bearing to buy smithing stones at the shop in the Round Table Hold. Okay, but they cost a lot of runes, so now I need to farm this stupid bird to buy the stones and then pay more runes to finally upgrade it. That was just for one weapon. Imagine having to do that over and over and over again for each weapon you want to try. It gets old very fast. And imagine making a new save, it's gonna be even more work than that. I don't know what the solution would be to fix this, but as a player, this is tedious, and they really should have implemented a better system that is more conducive to player experimentation. On top of that, because of the new boss philosophy, that bosses must take all of your health in one attack, while you can barely get one hit in, it incentivizes players to go for weapons that deal the most amount of damage in the fewest amount of swings. If Melania, Malekith, and Elbeast are all going to play this BS game of running away or pulling out an overpowered move that one-shots me, of course I'm going to respond by cheating back the game with the most overpowered weapon, 60 plus vigor, jump attacks only, and a plus 10 mimic tier. And that's a shame because there are so many cool weapons and builds that I love to try, but I feel disincentivized from experimenting when I know the alternative is smashing my head into a wall against bosses and enemies that can kill me in the blink of an eye. My conflicting opinions extend to the open world as well. Exploring this open world on my very first playthrough was one of the most memorable gaming experiences I've ever had. I've already talked about the first time I set my eyes on Limgrave, but this wow moment happened over and over and over again. Seeing Stormvale Castle in its large size from a distance, seeing Liurnia from atop this cliff for the first time, stumbling onto Caelid as the sky turned into a hellish red, and jumping over the small brick wall and just seeing everything. Riding up the elevator and setting foot on Atlas Plateau, with its beautiful golden glow, trees with orange leaves, and the unfathomably large architecture. Volcano Manor and its bright red lava. Elden Ring is not just full of beauty, but also full of surprises. Who could have guessed that there would be an elevator that'd take you all the way down to an underground level with a beautiful night sky? Who could have guessed there'd be multiple of these sections? And who could have guessed after beating Radon, meteors would fall from the sky and reveal yet another underground section, even larger and more complex than any of the other underground sections, where we could progress Ronnie's quest before fighting Astel, one of the most visually striking bosses in the whole game. There is so much freedom in how you choose to explore. The first time I played this game, I reached Liurnia not by beating Godric, but by going around the castle and finding myself here. On my first playthrough, I reached the Atlas Plateau through the elevator, and it wasn't until a later playthrough that I discovered you can also reach it by finding this cave and climbing up higher and higher until you set foot on it. Behind this church is a teleporter, which is how I ended up at Caelid for the first time. And this isn't the only instance of teleporting, because there are times when you open a chest and it'll just automatically teleport you to an unknown location. This is how I found out that this world would be so much bigger than anything I expected. On my very first playthrough, Elden Ring was a 10 out of 10 experience until I reached the mountaintop of the giants. This is where the quality of the game drops off significantly. This is by far my least favorite section of the game because it feels so barren. And while that might have been the intention of the developers to make this cold, snowy area so devoid of life, it doesn't mean that it does anything interesting for me, who just got done exploring through Lanedale, one of the best sections in the game. And I think this area exemplifies the issue with Elden Ring's open world. Elden Ring is way too big for its own good. Because of its large size, Elden Ring is constantly recycling enemies and bosses in order to fill up what would otherwise be empty space. I think it's fine to recycle certain enemies depending on context, but the problem with Elden Ring is that it takes it too far. When you go to the Hellish Caelid, the enemies in the area are thematically appropriate. These giant birds and dogs feel like creation of the devil, something as evil and terrifying as Caelid itself. But then they're also found here, in the snowy mountaintops, and they feel extremely out of place. You also have the dragons, which is such a cool thing to see the first time you stumble upon one. But then you see a second, a third, a fourth, and so many more, until dragons are no longer cool. They become boring and not exciting. How the fuck do you manage to make dragons lame? But the worst cases of recycling are the bosses. Like, come on, there's no need to recycle one of the best bosses, the Soldier of God, and place him all over Limgrave, FromSoft. Far too many bosses are recycled and placed randomly in the world. Margit is the first main boss most players will encounter. He has a cool cutscene, and because of his early game difficulty, he will stick in the minds of many players. But then he randomly appears in your path as you reach Lanedale, and you get to fight him again. I know that there might be lore reasons that can explain this, but truthfully, I don't care for lore reasons. I care about how it impacts my perception of this game and its world. And this second Margit makes the first Margit so much less cool and interesting. I killed Margit, so why is he here? Why does he have the same exact tags, and why does he just appear as any other enemy? Godric is another great boss who should be unique to Stormveil, right? Wrong, because he can actually be found in the Everjail, in the Atlas Plateau. The Red Wolf on your way to Renala, he can be found in the open world. The Ancestor Spirit you find in Siofra, which requires lighting up 8 torches to access and is absolutely beautiful. You can also find him in Noxtella, where again you have to light up torches to access him. Godfrey shows up as a spirit before Morgoth, even though you face a much better version of him before fighting Radagon and the Elden Beast, so why even have this stupid yellow version of him? Why spoil this boss way ahead of time? The Goskin duo is just a reuse of these two bosses that can be found individually around the world and who are actually fun to fight one-on-one, but now mashed together in an unbalanced mess. It's not just that recycling reusing enemies are less interesting than if a new, unique boss were in its place. The problem is that reusing these cool bosses and hastily placing them randomly throughout the open world, retroactively, worsens and cheapens your experience with them. This dragon would be so much more memorable if you only encountered him once and this way, or at the very least, if FromSoft showed some restraint and had far, far less dragon fights. The problems with the open world become much more obvious on subsequent playthroughs. Because the magic of discovery has run its course, this is where you figure out what content is actually worth going through, either because it's fun or because it has something I need. So this is what my subsequent runs typically look like. Since I like the legacy dungeons, I'll actually try to go through all of them, or at the very least Stormvale, Raya Lucaria, Lanedale, and Farum Azula. So I go straight to Stormvale, beat Morgan and Godric, go straight to Raya Lucaria, beat Renala, then go up to the Atlas Plateau, and maybe I might go to Mount Gelmir at Volcano Manor. But if not, I'll just go to Lanedale, fight Morgott, and then do a glorified 20-minute run back through mountaintops to get to Fire Giant, play through Farum Azula, probably skip the Haligtree and Melania unless I'm ready to put up with a lot of bullshit, and then fight Gideon, Godfrey, and Elden Beast. In other words, I'm running past most of the content, because once the joy of discovery and exploration has subsided, I realized that the most fun content in the game is the more streamlined content, like the legacy dungeons and the bosses. Speaking of, this game is in desperate need of a boss rush mode. Sekiro is the first game to implement this feature, and it's great. Everyone likes it. For some reason, Elden Ring, which came out 3 years after Sekiro, just decided they didn't need a boss rush mode. So every time you get an itch to fight a boss again, you're going to have to go into New Game Plus or make a whole new save and then do a lot of horse riding just to get to the bosses you want to face. Although Elden Ring's world is constantly impressing the player with its scale, I do wish that FromSoft could have toned it back a bit so that the distance between interesting locations was shorter, and so we can spend more time doing the interesting things instead of riding around a torrent with just the beautiful visuals to keep us occupied. And so, with these conflicting thoughts on Elden Ring, I decided it's finally time to play the Elden Ring DLC and see if it could capture the same magic exploring the world for the very first time. And it did. The field you teleport to is beautiful. There are new enemies to fight, which was a relief. Every time I'd approach an interesting landmark, I felt like I would see 2 or 3 more things that piqued my interest, and so I'd have to make a mental note of it and come back to it later. You know that thing Elden Ring does, where it continues to surprise you with the size of the world? Shadow the Erdtree did that again when I discovered the Cerulean coast in the southern part of the map. I was shocked by the beauty of this area, in the beautiful blue glow that stemmed from the flowers and stretched into the sky. I discovered another hole in the ground that led way below to a secret area. Not too far off was a strange ruin of rows and rows of fingers. The verticality of this world is insane. One moment you'll be looking up at a tall cliff, wondering how you're supposed to get up there, and before you know it, you can find yourself up there, looking down at the spot you were standing at just a few moments ago. There was one instance where, from atop a tall cliff, I looked down and noticed a crossing grace that I had somehow ran past and didn't notice. I quickly teleported to the nearest grace to reach this new grace, and grabbed another shadow tree fragment. And that was a really cool moment. The verticality of the world makes it very intriguing, but it also makes the map very hard to use since there's no way of distinguishing different levels of elevation simply by looking at the map, which was a bit frustrating at times. Since the DLC is late game content, Shadow of the Erdtree brings everyone down to the same level through the implementation of Shadow Tree fragments. Because the level of difficulty has increased in this DLC, it was important for FromSoft to bring all players down to the same level and provide a way for them to significantly level up. The more you increase your Shadow Tree level, the stronger your attacks become, and the less damage you will receive. They also have a separate leveling system for your summons in Torrent, which kinda strengthens the arguments that maybe using summons is the intended way to play the game. Hell, Maybe that's what the devs were thinking when they created the waterfowl move. Let me know what you guys think. I think the Shadow Tree leveling system is smart, but I think the way it's implemented is not executed as well as it could have been. To level up your Shadow Tree level, you have to find fragments that are scattered around the open world. When you find one of these golden crosses, that's how you can find one of them. But many of these fragments are going to be hidden and buried away in some of the weirdest locations ever. For example, this hippo that I almost ran past because I thought he wouldn't be worth the trouble drops a Shadow Tree fragment. Sometimes you can find them in such unremarkable locations that leaves me wondering just how many have I passed at this point, if they can truly be placed anywhere. It would be fine if Shadow Tree leveling wasn't essential, but it really is in this DLC. If you want to survive the attacks thrown at you, even by regular enemies, and especially bosses, you will need those fragments to level up. I think a better alternative would have been to only have the major bosses drop a Shadow Tree fragment, exactly like how it works in Sekiro. That way, players who defeat a boss can be rewarded for their efforts, and be at the proper level necessary for whatever challenge comes after this. This would also make it easier for FromSoft to predict what level players would be at any given time, and thus tune the difficulty of enemies and bosses accordingly. The joy of discovery and exploration from the base game are all here, as well as any of the other positives, but unfortunately, all of the negatives from the base game also carry over to the DLC. I will say once again, this map is way too large for its own good. It impressed me with its scale, which I'm sure is from soft school at this point, but I already have a feeling that if I were to replay this DLC, I would find most of the map to not be worth going over again. Enemies are still being heavily recycled all around the map, and because of this I found myself just running past them all, just like I did in the base game. The dragons are still one of the worst offenders of recycled content. The rewards I get for exploring aren't enough to keep me satisfied either. The DLC hands out a lot of smithing stones, but like I said before, I think the weapons upgrade system is tedious and is not conducive to experimentation. Therefore, I didn't even bother trying any of the new weapons I found. I also became frustrated with the amount of cookbooks that I'd get. Every time I'd see a glowing item and it wasn't a Shadow Tree fragment, all I felt was disappointment because I know that Shadow Tree fragments are the only useful thing I needed in order to be strong enough to tackle the challenges of the DLC. Something that I love about the DLC is that boss runbacks are seemingly non-existent now, at least with the bosses I face. This is already done well in the base game, but Shadow the Earth Tree cuts it down even further, and I hope this means that boss runbacks are now a thing of the past, since I never really felt like they added anything to the game, other than a sense of frustration and added punishment for dying, even though I think losing your XP is already punishing enough. Disappointingly, the bosses in the DLC continue to have the same philosophy as the ones in the base game. That is, ultra fast attacks, one-shot attacks, two-shot attacks, combos that come out so fast they can two-shot you, large explosive AoEs, seemingly unlimited stamina, unclear attacks, and everything else in between. I won't go into any detail with any of the bosses, other than showing the second phase of Radon as my evidence that FromSoft has run out of ideas on how to make their bosses even more difficult than before. And because they have run out of any interesting ideas to increase the difficulty, they just resort to attacks that come out so fast, do high damage, while adding more fireworks and AoEs for you to dodge, all so that the player spends more time avoiding the attacks and less time attacking the boss. It was during my time against Mesmer that I realized that we have lost so much of what made Bloodborne, Dark Souls 3, and Sekiro bosses so special. There's no longer any tension fighting a boss because boss fights can end in the blink of an eye. There's no longer a sense of mastery either. There's only a feeling that I was able to out-BS a boss before he out-BS me. I won't even beat Radon because there's nothing there to pull me in. The cutscene, the music, it amped me up. I wanted to fight him, but if the only way you're going to make him more difficult is by pulling out moves like this, and this, and this, then I think I'm good. All I can hope is that in the future, maybe FromSoft will realize that having the player overcome so much poo-poo caca isn't the only way to give players a strong sense of achievements. And before I continue harping on about this game, I'm going to leave it there. Elden Ring could have been the best game of all time, or at least in that discussion. And though it might be that game for many people, it isn't for me. Elden Ring is an amazing game because it's so full of beauty and wonder. Its large scale constantly wows the player. Seeing the map get bigger and bigger as you collect the map pieces has you wondering just how big this world is. Finding secret areas is consistently jaw-dropping, and again, you will wonder what other surprises you will find. There are so many weapons and spells to play around with, so much choice in dressing up your character. The legacy dungeons are some of the best levels FromSoft has ever made. The visuals are so gorgeous, like if I was looking at a painting. The music, the performances, the visual design of the bosses. And Elden Ring is a bad game because FromSoft made an open world that was too large for its own good, forcing them to recycle enemies to fill up space in what would otherwise just be empty spaces, retroactively cheapening our experiences with many enemies and bosses. Nothing in this game is allowed to be special because everything needs to be recycled to fill up space. Elden Ring is a bad game because of the severe drop in quality when you reach the mountaintops, and the many terrible bosses that you have to face in the boss rush to the finale. Elden Ring is a bad game because FromSoft was more focused on making a hard game rather than a fair and challenging one, and this is most evident in the many late game bosses. The boss philosophy forces the player to avoid their moves rather than engaging with them in any meaningful way. Elden Ring is the most impressive game I've ever played. It gave me some of the best moments I've ever had in gaming. And Elden Ring is disappointing because it falls short on so many levels that I'm not even sure if I could call this game one of my favorites of all time, even though it has everything it needs to be up there. And that's a real shame.